This is episode 1 of The Lens from BodyCamBust, and I'm here with my co-host, Greg, a former police officer from the San Diego Police Department, and he is also a driving instructor for the police department, and not to mention, an awesome YouTuber who knows everything about barbecue. Greg, come on, tell the world more about yourself.
Yes, I was a police officer at San Diego PD. I 30 years with the San Diego Police Department. Most of my time, 25 years, was spent out in the field pushing a black and white in patrol. And as you mentioned, I teach driving for the academy, the regional academy. So it's not just San Diego police recruits, but recruits from all over the county, from all the cities within San Diego County and also the Sheriff's Department. And the last 5 years of my career, I was the coordinator. So I was in charge of that program at the academy and also the specialized vehicle training for San Diego PD, which basically ATVs, 4x4s, prisoner vans, side-by-sides, trailers, things like that. I did all the training for those vehicles as well. And I'm still currently a teaching at the academy as an adjunct instructor for the college that the academy is run through.
Cool. And for our BodyCamBust subscribers that don't know your YouTube history, can you let them know a little bit what you've done over a decade, right? You've been on YouTube over a decade. So the ones that don't know your culinary skills, let them know about it right here.
Well, I have two channels. My first channel and the largest channel of the two is called Ballistic Barbecue. And I just started that on a whim. I actually had no intent on continuing with the channel. You know, it was just sort of a I was doing a pork shoulder. I had my wife a camera and she videoed me and I posted it, and that's the history of that. It's been a good thing for me. You know, it took me in a cool area. I guess now that's kind of my full-time job, is doing these cooking videos, outdoor cooking. And then because of the popularity I had with my hamburger videos on Ballistic Barbecue, I decided to start a second channel, which is called Ballistic Burgers. You know about my burger videos, Andrew.
Absolutely, because when I have some barbecue questions, you know who I call. You're my man.
Oh, yeah.
And let everyone know some of the notable YouTubers you've collaborated with in the past.
Well, the biggest YouTuber I've collaborated with would be Guga of Guga Foods. And Guga and I go way back. I've known Guga since he first started. He actually, the irony is he was emailing me asking me for advice and wanted me to watch his videos and give him critique, which I did. And boy, his channel exploded. I mean, he's one of the largest cooking channels on YouTube now, and well-deserved. He's a really good guy, so he deserves all the success. I wish a little of it would bleed into my channel, but I'm not complaining about the success I've had either.
Yeah. Well, I've been fortunate enough to meet him once with you and Cosmo Q at Vid Summit many moons ago. And I think you should tell everyone how we got to know each other, because there's a little bit of a story there. Because I think that will explain how we ended up, or we're co-hosting this podcast now because of certain...
We're friends now.
Exactly, because of some YouTube circumstances. But you're better at telling the story, so let everyone know how we met.
So this was quite a long time ago. I received an email from one of my viewers saying, hey, with a link to a video. Hey, this guy's ripping off your footage. And I clicked on it, and it was a Babbletop video. And I remember it was a Gordon Ramsay burger kind of a montage. And every time there was a transition from scene to scene, it was my hand with my spatula flipping my burger. It actually looked very cool, but I shot it, it was mine. And I know there's fair use, so you weren't violating any YouTube guidelines, but I sent you a message and just said, hey, next time maybe ask, or let me know you're going to be doing this. And I guess it was you that responded back. It was very polite. And that was it. I was done with it. I wasn't going to worry about it. And fast forward to VidCon, there was a rooftop kind of an opening party there at VidCon. Myself and another YouTuber named Cosmo. His real name's Darian, but he goes by Cosmo. We're up on the roof, and then all of a sudden, you walk up to me and introduce yourself. I mean, you're very outgoing, and we're talking, and then I kind of looked down at your badge, and I saw Babbletop, and I pointed at you, and I go, you! And then you looked at and you knew exactly who I was when you saw my logo, my name, and everything. And I know you took a picture of me and texted it to your editor, who I think was the culprit who was finding this footage. But anyway, the rest is history. We hit it off, and we've been, I guess, friends ever since. So it was good. It was a good thing.
Yeah, and on my side, as you know, I started with the faceless channels, in the whole realm of fair use, and I had Babbletop. Then I ended up creating my own faceless cooking channel, which was Dished. And then it spun into another channel that was the vlog channel, where it focuses on my travel experiences now. And
finances, you did a finance channel too, right?
I did a finance channel too. And then, I had this idea of going into body cam footage videos. And I started off by myself with my team. And the reason I'm a little bit passionate about it is because over here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, they once had a pilot project to see if police officers should be wearing body cam equipment, body cam camera equipment. And they decided after I believe a 7-month testing trial, that it wasn't worth it. And I personally think that body cam footage on police officers are good because it tells the story as best as it can. It's not just what he says or she says or what the cop says or the suspect says. Everything you could see and hear and judge for yourself. But I believe in the jurisdiction of Toronto and Ontario that they started wearing body cam cameras. And I started this body cam channel. And when it was time to start a podcast, because my rep at YouTube said, you should start a podcast, the first person I thought that would be the perfect co-host was you, because you're a former cop. And I believe you once told me that when you were an officer, your precinct or your county, I don't know how it works exactly, weren't they one of the first people to have body cameras in California? Can you give us a little bit more details about that?
Yeah, I think San Diego Police Department, actually, we led the nation with the body cam stuff. So, I think we were the first in the nation to basically mandate that all officers were to wear body cams.
And what are your thoughts on body cams? What's the upside of an officer wearing a body camera, and what's potentially a downside? If there's no downside, just let us know that there's no downside. But in your point of view, what are the benefits and drawbacks of a body cam?
Well, the upside is you're getting the whole picture. A lot of times, it's in the past, especially the public was depending on footage they were getting maybe from a cell phone of a passerby who was just seeing, say a fight between a suspect and an officer. Physical force is always ugly. It never looks good. And when you see a police officer, on top of somebody wrestling around with them, people kind of immediately go to excessive force. That's where their minds are going. because they're not seeing what led to that. They're not seeing the officer trying to use verbal skills to get the person to comply. They're not seeing the offense maybe the person committed that led to that in the first place. So I think when it comes to physical force, it's very beneficial. Another thing that has turned out to be a benefit to the officers is a lot of times, this has happened to me, you make an arrest. Well, no one wants to be arrested. They're always, going to be upset about that. I mean, obviously, who wouldn't be upset about being put in jail? But then they lie about the encounter they had with the officer. And then it becomes, a he said, she said thing for the internal affairs investigator or a supervisor who's investigating the incident. And then when you have a body cam on, you're hearing, and you're seeing what happened and hearing the exchange. And we've actually had people filing false complaints against officers get arrested for it. So I think that's one of the really good things. The downside, I think there's more positives than negatives when it comes to body cams. Initially, police officers, especially me, I came on in the late 80s. I came on before there was computers in the car. It was almost like Adam 12, the technology we had, just a radio and a shotgun. Officers, they kind of tend to resist new technologies that come in. And there was a lot of pushback on body cams with San Diego PD initially, again, until they saw the benefits, with complaints and such. The negatives, I think, sometimes police officers have to lower themselves as far as the way they're talking to get a point across. And even though, like with San Diego PD, we're allowed to cuss if it's appropriate. It's just very ugly, though. When you're using foul language, it doesn't look professional at all. But there are times when, to get through to somebody, you have to lower yourself and maybe throw an F-bomb at them or something. And that could turn around and bite you, but it's just a reality. But I would guess that's probably one of the only negatives. Other than that, it's at the end of shift, where it used to be, there was a lot of frustration with printing machines before we had, again, the computers. Now it's dealing with downloading all the footage. I mean, it's terabytes of footage that these officers are having to download at the end of shift every day. And I hear a lot of complaints about that just because technology fails, maybe the system goes offline or whatever. But yeah, I think as far as overall, though, it's more positive than negative.
So I'm curious because you brought something up before. So if someone makes a complaint about an incident that happened with an officer and they lie about it, and the footage shows that they're lying, are you saying there could be additional charges put on to the suspect?
Yeah, the investigator, the IA investigator is going to start an investigation and they're going to sign off on it. The citizen will. So they're filing a false report.
Interesting. So if you were a consultant for the Montreal Police Department, I'm going to assume you would advocate that all cops in Montreal should wear a body camera.
I think, yes. And I was one of the officers, by the way, that when they were first talking about body cams, I wasn't real pro body cam. The thought of having Big Brother attached to my chest, for a whole shift. The other thing is, you're mandated to turn it on when you're getting out of the car. And there have been officers with my department who were basically being bum rushed by an armed suspect and didn't have time to turn the camera on, and they got a little disciplined for that. So, but anyway, getting back to your question, I think Montreal should reevaluate. I'd love to hear what their reasoning is, because it creates transparency. There's always a lot of distrust when it comes to the public and law enforcement. The way the media, they get more clicks by putting things in a negative perspective. And I think, you see these incidents where, again, like force was used, or maybe lethal force was used, and you see the picture that the media paints based on the limited footage they have, maybe from a cell phone. And then all of a sudden there's the body cam footage is released by the agencies, and all the distrust goes away with the incident. I mean, it's exactly how the officer was saying, what led up to the shooting, or again, the physical force. So I think there's more pros and cons.
I have a question about how police officers use their body camera. I've seen some instances where the officer is talking to the victim, and then the victim tells the officer, I want to tell you something, could you just turn it off for a second? And then you see the footage cuts, and then it goes back on. And he goes, oh, I want to tell you something else. Can you turn it off for a second? And then you see the officer, it's off, and it goes back on. Again, I got to be very clear that it's the victim asking the officer to turn it off for a second, and then he turns it back on. One, what are the rules? Is it an issue of, depending on what state you are, could it be that you're not allowed turning it off? Or is there like a blanket way that officers across the U.S. can use their body camera? And why is it that the victim knew he could ask the officer to turn it off for a few seconds and then turn it back on? Like what are the instances that can happen?
Well, that's going to be a policy thing. There's no nationwide policy regarding that, but a lot of times, we're talking to, say, victims of a sex crime, and you have to be sensitive to their needs. So that's when that would occur. One of the reasons that would occur, more of the real sensitive investigations that police officers deal with daily.
Okay. So if I'm a victim, in the States, I have the right to ask an officer to turn off their camera at certain points.
Well, yes, you do. But again, a lot of the agencies, they're going to have their own policies regarding when they can turn off the cameras. I mean, that seems like a reasonable request. So I'd imagine most of them would allow that.
Good to know. We have an interesting story that just popped up with a NFL star, Tyreek Hill. There's something that happened between him and a police officer in Miami, and I think we'll explore that in the next podcast. So everyone, thank you for joining our first ever podcast with my co-host Greg. Check out the second podcast on your screen. Click it right away. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe.